are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani, joining me is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man, so continuing on with our playoff predictions. Last episode, if you missed it, definitely go check it out already. We did our predictions for the Eastern Conference playoffs. And so now, as promised, here we are with our Western Conference playoff predictions. So just like the last episode, we're basically going to break down each series and give you guys our predictions and our thoughts on what we think is going to happen in the series and ultimately who we think is going to win. And the Western Conference is very interesting. It's one of those conferences that there's a lot of competition. And as game one have already kind of happened, a couple of them, but we can already see the competitive level in the West is next level.
Yeah, man, the matchups are great, I think, in the Western Conference. It's definitely worked out, I think, really well this year.
Yeah.
Especially when we talk about the matchups that happened after, I think, the first matchup, especially. The Western Conference is really good, and there's a reason why, the Western Conference is always known as a dogfight, right? Like, you never know what's going to happen in the Western Conference. And I think this year, that applies as well.
Yeah, no doubt. But speaking of that first matchup, let's jump right into our first Western Conference matchup. And the first matchup we have is the number 1 seeded Utah Jazz taking on the 8 seeded Memphis Grizzlies. So the Memphis Grizzlies actually ended up winning the play-in, beating out the Golden State Warriors, which was pretty impressive in its own right for Memphis to beat Golden State to get themselves into a playoff spot.
But it was a great game.
It was a very good game, actually. But in terms of the stats heading in for both teams, Utah comes into the series being ranked the 3rd best offense in the league, the 4th best defense in the league, obviously have the best record in the NBA this season. Meanwhile, Memphis had the 15th best offense, the 6th best defense this season. And in terms of Utah, they've been a great overall team this season, as we've talked about in previous episodes. They have good players who've been playing very well this season, like Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, who we'll talk about actually a little later. And they've all been great on both ends of the floor. So this Utah team has just been good since the jump. They also have great chemistry because it's pretty much the same team as last year with the same coach, same system, more familiarity. So everyone's going to know their role, which is very key in playoff basketball. You want all the guys to know what their role is, where they got to be, how they're supposed to operate to work as one well-oiled machine. And I think the Jazz are a big proponent of doing that this season. The biggest question for Utah is the health of Donovan Mitchell. Now, Donovan Mitchell missed game 1, which Memphis won game 1 with an ankle injury. He should be back for game 2 of this series. At this stage, we aren't confirmed yet if he's back or not, but Donovan Mitchell's health is going to be the biggest factor for Utah because, again, Utah has everything else. They have the shooting, they have the defense, they have the supplementary scoring, but what they are lacking right now is the closer. Donovan Mitchell is their closer, and he's going to be a pivotal player for the Utah Jazz. Now, meanwhile, for the Memphis Grizzlies, they've been playing a pretty good brand of basketball for the last month or so. They've been a very scrappy and fun team to watch, especially through these playing games, like against the Spurs, where they jumped out to a huge lead, and then against Golden State, where they beat Golden State in a very competitive game, and edged out Steph Curry and knocked him out of the playoffs. But Memphis has been playing very well, and a lot of that has to do with their 2 stars, John Morant and Dillon Brooks, stepping up, not being afraid of the big bright lights of the playoffs, and truly establishing themselves as playoff performers. Shout out Mississauga and Dillon Brooks. So they've been doing very well. Then, not to mention, Memphis has been a good defensive team this season. They've had the 6th best defense in the league. And a lot of their defense really allows them to open up the floor in transition, which plays well into their strength. They play a very fast style of basketball, so that helps a guy like John Morant, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr. Get up and down the floor and really take advantage of offensive lapses by the other team. So obviously, defense is Memphis' calling card. I think what it really comes down to, is Quinn Snyder versus Taylor Jenkins, who can really adjust more. Now, we know the stars are going to go out and do their thing. Like John Morant already proven he's not afraid. So is Dillon Brooks. With Memphis, I think it's also about the role players. Who else was going to step up with them? Obviously, a guy who we know very well in JV, He's been doing very well, beasting in the playoffs. But yeah, it really comes down to adjustments. Who's going to be able to counter what? Who's going to have that experience level? And I think in that regard, I got to give a bit of the edge to Quinn Snyder in this one. He's had playoff experience. He's a very tenured head coach in the NBA. So he definitely has a lot more experience than Taylor Jenkins. But Taylor Jenkins has already proven in his short time in Memphis that he's not afraid to adjust and tinker, which is very odd considering he comes from the Budenholzer tree.
Yeah.
It's a very odd thing. But Taylor Jenkins has been doing very well. But I think overall, this series is going to come down to experience. I think the Jazz simply have a lot more experience than the Memphis Grizzlies. And, we're going to actually see it moving forward, which is why I think our prediction for this series is going to be Utah in 5 if Donovan Mitchell is healthy.
Yeah, so to your point, Donovan Mitchell's health is the big question, obviously. Also, regarding your point about Taylor Jenkins in contrast to Mike Budenholzer, well, Nick Nurse came from the Dwayne Casey coaching tree, right? And we see how different those two guys are. So I think it also works in that regard. One point I want to mention about the Memphis Grizzlies, and it's kind of like a very Skip Bayless-y point that I'm about to bring up, but I think it works out in this regard. The Memphis Grizzlies can do damage to Utah Jazz simply because of the fact that there's no expectations for the Memphis Grizzlies. They have no pressure on them. Nobody thinks they're going to win any games. They were able to steal game 1, which was huge for them. But nobody we didn't have them making the playoffs even. No. So for them, this is just their first year with this core, and they have no expectations for themselves. Or I guess they do, but nobody else has any expectations for them, especially against the Utah Jazz. So they can do what they do without having any pressure on them. And as a result, they can afford to play, bad or play great. One of the biggest points of this series, and we've already seen it in Game 1, how much it will impact the series going forward, is the big man battle, the center battle. Jonas Valanciunas versus Rudy Gobert. Now, the main person that runs the engine of the Utah Jazz is Rudy Gobert on both ends of the ball. On the offensive end, his ability to get to a rim, his ability to go off of pick and rolls and attract the defense is what opens up Utah's shooters to launch away. And they had the best 3-point shooting. They were the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA this season, and a lot of it was due to Rudy Gobert's presence. Him being a lob threat, him being a threat in the low post. And then on the defensive end, obviously we know everything what Rudy Gobert is, right? He's probably going to be the defensive player of the year this year again, and well deserved.
And we also know what JV isn't on the defensive end.
Exactly, we know what JV isn't on the defensive end. However, in Game 1, JV was able to outplay Rudy Gobert, which was the first time that happened this season, considering the 3 other times Rudy Gobert completely and thoroughly outplayed JV. So if JV can play his usual, or if JV can play up to his potential and play the way he did in Game 1, that would be huge for the Memphis Grizzlies moving forward because of the fact that he allows them to do so much more. He gives them another rebounding threat on both ends of the ball. He gives them a low post threat on offense. He also gives them a spacer on the offensive end. And then on the defensive end, he gives them a big body at least, which they don't have with any of the other guys. You can throw in Jaren Jackson in there, but Jaren Jackson obviously is coming off the injury. They don't want to work him too much. So JV is, very crucial for the Memphis Grizzlies moving forward. And then the final point that I wanted to talk about, and this was a point that Charles Barkley made too. And this is a point that a lot of the older players make with this new era, and I tend to agree with it in the sense that the Utah Jazz, the whole year, and we said this in going back to even in December, we made an episode earlier in the season where we talked about the Utah Jazz actually.
Yeah. And
we said that all of their wins came because of the fact that they just killed teams from the 3-point line. But their losses came when they weren't able to outscore teams from the 3-point line. And the problem I have with today's NBA is that simple fact. The fact that teams cannot seem to adjust when their 3-point shot isn't falling. Charles Barkley mentioned Utah Jazz are shooting like 15% from the 3-point line. Bro, you have Rudy Gobert. You have slashers like Mike Conley, Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson. Attack the basket. Get some mid-range jumpers, bro. The mid-range is the most vital part of offense in the NBA playoffs because of the fact that the teams are giving you those mid-range jumpers. We saw that with the Miami Heat too, how much they struggled just because they couldn't hit mid-range jumpers. Utah, if they want to win the series, they have to outshoot Memphis, which they are very capable of doing. But the problem I have, especially with that game one, was the fact that they couldn't seem to adjust when their three-point shot wasn't falling. And this is a trend with, I think, every team at this point in the NBA. When their three-point shot doesn't fall, they struggle. And that should not be the case.
Yeah, no, I gotta agree with that one, man. Like, I think that's really what a lot of the live and die by the three, that a lot of that comes into play. But I think in the case of Utah, like, you can say, they live and die by the three, but again, based on what they've shown all year, which has always been a criticism of the Utah Jazz, that they've been able to do it for part of the season, but not the whole season. This year, they were able to do it for the whole year. Now translating it into the playoffs with the experience, with the depth. Obviously, even bring up a guy like Bogdanovich as well. They have Jingles and all the players that they actually have. I think the experience is still going to play a factor, and it's still going to be the reason why Utah should be able to take care of business in this series. Now, again, this is actually going to be a pretty fun series in the sense the way Memphis is playing and how good Utah actually is. But I think if Donovan Mitchell comes back, Utah gets the closer, it's pretty easy to see Utah winning the series.
Yeah, game one might have been a blip, right?
Yeah. We've seen it happen.
Yeah, we expect to see the same Utah Jazz moving forward. That moves us on to our 2 versus 7 matchup, and it's definitely not a regular 2 versus 7 matchup. In large part, thank you very much, injuries and COVID. We're talking about the 2-seeded Phoenix Suns versus the 7-seeded Los Angeles Lakers. Now, coming into the series, the Phoenix Suns own the 5th best offense in the league and the 9th best defense in the league, whereas the LA Lakers own the 24th best offense in the league, and they are ranked first in defensive rating. Now, for the Suns and their offense, they have a number of great players, especially in Devin Booker, who's their go-to scorer, and CP3, who's their playmaker and also secondary scorer. Obviously, with Game 1 in the books, we'll have to see what happens with CP3 moving forward in this injury. And unfortunately, this just seems to be a trend for CP3 again and again and again. Unfortunately, they also have some additional shooters to space the floor for guys like Devin Booker and CP3. For example, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and Jay Crowder are a good trio of wings. And then they have a good big man duo in DeAndre Ayton and Dario Saric, who can set screens, provide good release valves in the post and mid-range, and can do a lot for them. When during the season, when, for example, DeAndre Ayton was struggling with his matchups, Dario Saric would come in and provide a huge boost for them. And so Dario Saric has turned himself into a very good player for the Phoenix Suns. On the other hand, though, the Lakers do have the best defense in the league for a reason, right? Despite all the injuries that happen, they still own the best defense in the league, especially with a guy like Frank Vogel coaching them, whose calling card is his defense, going back to his Indiana Pacers days. In particular, guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Dennis Schroeder, and Wesley Matthews will have to play big parts in the series on the defensive end against the Suns and their perimeter players. LeBron, I think, won't have to play too hard on the defensive end in the sense that the wings that he's matching up with are not exactly like shot creators, right? Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and Jay Crowder obviously can do a little bit, but their main calling cards are as shooters, catch and shoot players. So on that side of the ball, I think LeBron can take it a bit easier on the defensive end this series. However, yeah, don't tell us to skip Bayless, pretty much. But I think the main key for the LA Lakers, as usual, will be Anthony Davis and his ability to play well on the defensive end of the ball. And we saw in Game 1, that was clearly not the case. Now, I think what we've seen from AD is that he'll be able to turn it around. But AD, again, is the key for the LA Lakers on the defensive side of the ball. His ability to switch out onto the perimeter and bottle up, for example, pick and rolls or catch and shoot opportunities. And then his ability to, defend the basket and defend the paint against the Phoenix Suns and their creators and attackers. They'll also have to figure out how to run their center rotation, which has been a problem for them throughout the season, and then especially even more so since they acquired Andre Drummond. And Frank Vogel, his rotations. If there's one problem I have with Frank Vogel this year, it's been his rotations, and the epitome of that is their center rotation. In the sense that Andre Drummond, frankly, should not even be playing half the time, let alone starting. If you want to play him off the bench, that's okay maybe, but Andre Drummond should not be starting. And then you have to figure out how to use Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell, who Gasol is a good defender, but he is slow at his age. And then Montrez is just a subpar defender, in all honesty. Shifting things over to the offensive side of the ball for the LA Lakers, their offense is not good, to say the least, especially without LeBron James on the court. It gets pretty messed up because of the fact that they just don't have a great set of creators or spacers. They have a couple guys who can do both, but they don't have, a vast amount of those guys, unfortunately for them. Anthony Davis, in particular, is going to have to dominate his matchup against whoever guards him, let it be Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, who did an amazing job on him in Game 1. So he's going to have to dominate that matchup, whoever comes at him. Again, please, Frank Vogel, Game 2 moving forward, do not play Andre Drummond, or at least play him off the bench. I think in this case, Marc Gasol can be very useful. Frank Vogel didn't want to play Marc Gasol in the Warriors game, which was very understandable. But in this series, when Marc Gasol is facing a guy like DeAndre Ayton, where he has more of a chance to be able to keep up with him. I think in this case, Marc Gasol needs to be able to play because of the fact that you need a center who can do a lot of things for you on the offensive side of the ball for at least 3 quarters until AD moves to the center spot in the 4th quarter. And Marc Gasol, we know with his passing and shooting, LA players have all said that they love playing with him pretty much a lot more than Andre Drummond, including Kyle Kuzma. We've seen those stats with Anthony Davis beside Andre Drummond, and without Andre Drummond, we've seen those stats. Kyle Kuzma, Wesley Matthews, KCP, Alex Caruso, and Dennis Schroeder have to all play well, as in the other guys, because we know what we're going to get from LeBron and hopefully from AD. But yeah, as usual, LeBron James will either make or break the offense. And then for the Phoenix Suns on the defensive end, they're a very good defensive team. Not only they're not only a good offensive team, but they're a very good defensive team. They have a number of good perimeter players, and Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder, who can at least help slow down LeBron. Obviously you can't stop him, but more bodies throughout LeBron. DeAndre Ayton, like I said, could do well in this matchup as he did in Game 1. He can do well moving forward. He's a very quick big man, so in that sense, he can keep up with Anthony Davis, and he has the length to be able to bother Anthony Davis. CP3 and Booker won't have to expend a crazy amount of energy on D because of the fact that, again, Dennis Schroeder might get a couple of layups, but he's not really a shooter. And then KCP and Alex Caruso are not exactly threats to go crazy with the ball in their hands. So in that sense, the Phoenix Suns backcourt can at least don't have to expend a tremendous amount of energy on the defensive end. But yeah, the series comes down to, for the Phoenix Suns and their defense, pretty much just trying to stop LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That is what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to against any team that faces the Los Angeles Lakers. And for all the reasons I mentioned, because of the fact that I think we all know this is going to be a very evenly matched series. But I've learned, and we've learned, not to bet against LeBron, right? You can't bet against LeBron, especially in the first round, right? It's very tough to bet against LeBron James. And then factoring in CP3's injury moving forward, whatever happens with that. For us, our prediction will be the Los Angeles Lakers winning this series against the Phoenix Suns in 7 games.
Yeah. I mean, I know people are going to be, shocked by that. Like, oh my, Phoenix has outplayed them. They clearly were the better team in Game 1. Why do you still think the Lakers to win? Well, let me explain that. Because this Lakers team is really giving me the vibe of the 2018 Cavs that LeBron is on. This is not a great team. It's not a great team. I watched pretty much the first half of Game 1, and that really told me all I needed to know about this Lakers team. You talk about their defense. I mean, Game 1. I mean, against the Warriors, they were great. That the Lakers
in the second half.
Yeah, in the second half they were great. But again, against the Suns, that Lakers defense is pretty bad in terms of, not helping on shooters or not being quick to close out or
not rotating.
Like, it just little minor, details that they kept missing, which just led to easy buckets for Phoenix Suns players. And again, Phoenix literally just kept capitalizing on mistakes the Lakers kept making. And I really like this Phoenix Suns team. You know what's funny? I didn't even realize that this was Devin Booker's first playoff series.
Yeah.
And he
balled out.
He balled out in his first playoff game. He's a very good player. We all were like, let's get Devin Booker in a playoff series. Well, here we are. Not to mention, you got CP3 to set everybody up. I like Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. But the pairing of Jay Crowder has actually worked out very well. I mean, Jay Crowder pretty much works on every team he's on. So he's
unless he was on the Cavs.
And then again, DeAndre Ayton's been pretty solid this season. Dario Saric, he was a good player back in Philadelphia too. So there's no surprise to me how well Saric has been doing for them. But again, so I know the Suns are good. I know they're a good team. But back to the Lakers, the offense is terrible. They suck on offense. Without LeBron on the court, I swear to God, it looked as though like they were all just lost, bro. They were looking at each other. And the person I blame the most is Anthony Davis.
Yep.
You are 6'11". Why are you taking mid-range jumpers?
Well, heavily contested.
Contested mid-range jumpers. Get inside the paint. Like I think Anthony Davis has this fear that every time he goes into contact, he's gonna get injured.
Yeah.
But
that's unfortunate.
You're 6'11". You are strong. You can dominate. And at the bare minimum, you can draw foul because you're a decent free throw shooter. So why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he take over? Why doesn't he be that number one option who the Lakers are basically grooming him to be eventually when LeBron retires? So why isn't he doing it? This is what Anthony Davis was brought in for. He was brought in to be that guy to support LeBron. So when LeBron's on the bench, AD takes over. That's the whole point. That was his whole point. So AD not taking over is a big reason. Then when you talk about the Lakers' other players, they have no creation. Dennis Schroeder, I don't know what he's doing, but goddamn, remember, you should have took that $80 million.
Yeah.
You absolutely should have taken that $80 million because you're not going to get that now. After the performance that you've been putting on, you're just making poor decisions. It reminds me of Eric Bledsoe.
Ooh.
It reminds me of Eric Bledsoe. Just making poor decisions, breaking layups. I don't know what his problem is. And then Andre Drummond also, he's just clogging up the paint.
A big penguin.
He's a big penguin. Honestly speaking, I agree. Why doesn't Frank Vogel just play Marc Gasol? Marc Gasol makes more sense in this series than Andre Drummond. And then not to mention, it also helps out Anthony Davis as well. So, and then players who you want to step up, like a KCP, breaking every shot he took. Kyle Kuzma, when he took 2 shots in game 1. And he missed both of them. You can't have it. You can't play 19 minutes and take 2 shots. Just that offense on that team has no creation with LeBron off the floor. And that is the biggest reason why it reminded me of the 2018 Cavs. They're so reliant on LeBron. LeBron has to carry these guys to the finish line. And again, the Suns have a lot of weapons on that team. So, the Lakers are going to, if they continue this and be sloppy, they might be down 3-1 or 3-0 or something. You can very much see that happening. But based on back to your point, you just can't bet against LeBron. Because LeBron took that 2018 Cavs team to the NBA Finals. And if he can take that team, which was even worse than this Laker team, in my opinion, I think he can get this Laker team he can drag this Laker team out of the first round. Now, granted that given his health, which again, LeBron does not look 100% right now, but we know he will ramp it up. And I think in game 2, we'll see that for sure. He's going to be a much different player in game 2. But I have to agree with you, man. The Laker offense isn't playing well, and the defense isn't good enough. It's gonna be a rough time for the LA Lakers.
I mean, the Lakers are definitely better than the Cavs because of the fact that the Cavs are terrible defensively, whereas the Lakers are very, very good defensively. So
when they
at
turn
least,
it on.
huh?
When they turn it on, when they keep it on.
Well, I mean, at least that's going for them, right? Yeah. But for everyone who's panicking about the series, though, we know from history, LeBron notoriously just chills in game 1. He always takes game 1 as a feel-out game. And then obviously from game 2 onwards, he just unfortunately, destroys the other team.
He lets you have one.
Yeah,
Gracious king.
Yeah. He lets the other team have one pretty pretty much usually every series. I mean, what was it, Portland and Houston last year?
Pretty much.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did he like Indiana win game 1-2 when the Canada?
Yeah, man, he does it every single year.
Yeah, he does it a lot.
But yeah, moving on to our 3 versus 6 matchup, we have the Denver Nuggets as the 3 seed versus the Portland Trailblazers as the 6 seed. Now, coming into this series, Denver owns the 7th best offensive rating in the league and the 12th best defensive rating in the league, whereas the Blazers own the 2nd best offensive rating in the league and own, well, definitely not the best, but 2nd worst defensive rating in the league at 29th. Now, for the Nuggets, the first thing you have to address for them is the fact that they're missing 3 offensive creators in Jamal Murray, Will Barton, and PJ Dozier, who are very key for them. Obviously Jamal Murray is their 2nd best player, and he was having a great season this campaign. And unfortunately, he tore his ACL, which was not good at all. And then Will Barton notoriously has been, inconsistent with his health. And then PJ Dozier is another guy that has come along very well for them in the last couple of years. And unfortunately, you're missing him. And so that just means that they're going to have to rely on Nikola Jokic even more, which is the usual thing at this point. And Nikola Jokic, for his part, is the best player in the series. So that works out very well for the Denver Nuggets. They also have Michael Porter Jr., who pretty much can score from everywhere on the court. And he's having a fantastic season, particularly when the Denver Nuggets asked him to carry more of a load offensively since Jamal Murray went down. Michael Porter Jr. has responded fantastically to that, and he very well deserves a spot on the most improved list. Aaron Gordon, Facundo Campazzo, and Monte Morris are also 3 very good offensive players who will determine the Denver Nuggets series for them. My final point about the Denver Nuggets offense is the fact that despite the injuries that they have and despite the sometimes over-reliance on Nikola Jokic, Denver will be fine offensively simply because of the fact that the Blazers suck on defense. And that's what it comes down to. We've talked about the Blazers' defense on numerous occasions throughout the show, especially this year. The Blazers suck on defense. They're the 29th ranked defense. They can't stop anybody. They can't protect the rim. They can't protect the perimeter. They can't do anything right on the defensive end. That stems from the fact that their starting lineup itself is subpar. Besides Robert Covington and Yusuf Nurkic, who even they haven't had the best seasons of their careers, everyone else is subpar defensively. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and Norman Powell are all walking mismatches for on the defensive end. So, the Blazers suck. Their starting lineup sucks on the defensive end. And then when you get to the bench too, you have Enes Kanter and I almost said LaMelo Ball. Oops, that was blasphemous. Carmelo Anthony, my bad.
He's the true Melo. Get it right.
He is the true Melo. Yes, he is the true Melo. Enes Kanter and Carmelo Anthony are pretty much your only options in the series off the bench, and they also suck, to say the least, on the defensive end. Now, Melo has been trying a bit more on the defensive end. I will say that he I think has been playing pretty solid for his standards. But yeah, Enes Kanter might be the worst defensive big man in the league. For the Blazers, on the offensive side of the ball, they are great offensively, especially, again, with their backcourt in CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, who can go nuclear at any time. And then with Yusuf Nurkic facilitating for them, and then Norman Powell as like a release valve for them. So with the Nuggets missing a bunch of guards, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum will be able to do even more damage without a guy like PJ Dozier, Will Barton, defending those guys. Like I mentioned before, the Blazers will have to rely on their starters on both ends of the ball. Carmelo Anthony can be on and off at times. Enes Kanter, can only play limited minutes because of the fact that he's great on the offensive side of the ball, but defensively, he's terrible. So you're going to have a cap on Enes Kanter's limits, which means, again, the starters will have to do everything for the Portland Trailblazers for the most part. And the key for them is to pretty much, as usual, just involve Nikola Jokic in the pick and roll as much as possible, which is the strategy for every team going up against the Denver Nuggets. So it'll be interesting to see how Mike Malone counters that. Now in Game 2, he did do very well in terms of hedging and doubling, especially in the second half. So, the Blazers will have to do what they can to try to abuse the Nikola Jokic matchup And then especially when, for example, the guards get doubled, having a guy like Norman Powell there instead of, for example, Gary Trent, who couldn't really attack the basket, now having a guy like Norman Powell there who can attack off the close-ups really helps them in this series. The Denver Nuggets have surprisingly played pretty solid defensively this year, despite the fact that they have like numerous limits. As I said, Jamal Murray is not a great defensive guard. Nobody across their team is really that great defensively, except for Aaron Gordon, who I think will serve as the X factor in the series on both sides of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, Aaron Gordon will have to be able to create a bit off the bounce, and then obviously serve as a spot-up shooter. But then defensively is where most of his work will come. Now, we saw what Mike Malone did in the second half of Game 2, where he put Aaron Gordon on Damian Lillard, and that really pretty much killed the Blazers after that. And that is the type of defense Aaron Gordon will have to play in the series for the Denver Nuggets to win. We know what he can do. We know his agility, his quickness, his size. He has all those. It's just about his, sometimes he has temporary lapses and the IQ, right? So if Aaron Gordon can hone in on those aspects of his defensive game, then that I think would be a very big boost for the Denver Nuggets. Finally, I think our prediction for the series. Now, again, this is a very evenly matched series. Denver is missing a few key players that I think would have finished the series faster for them. Yeah. But, the matchup of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum versus Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr., I think is a very exciting matchup. It's a very interesting matchup. It's a very evenly matched, matchup. So I think for us, we're going to say the Denver Nuggets will win the series in 7 games.
Yeah, I think, honestly speaking, it sucks for Denver because they had such a good year. Jokic had an MVP caliber season this year, and the injuries came at the worst possible time, especially in Jamal Murray's case, man, because he was having a very good year as well. Like if him and Jokic came into the playoffs healthy, like you said, this series would have been done in less games probably. But again, we are where we are at this point. Denver has the injury, but again, they have other guys stepping up. Like Michael Porter Jr. been doing a great job, in the absence of Jamal Murray, just being that scorer, utilizing Aaron Gordon as that versatile player, which has always been the problem with Aaron Gordon, which is that nobody really knew how to use him properly. Once you put him with the coach who can figure out how to use him, now you can see the benefits. Even the adjustment of putting Aaron Gordon on Damian Lillard, the smart idea. Again, Aaron Gordon's big, athletic, quick, so he can really make life tough for Damian Lillard. And again, like you're talking about a Blazers defense that isn't very good. So even if you're lacking a bit on the scoring department, a lot of players who are kind of able to take advantage of that. I mean, you're going up against the 29th ranked defense in the league out of 30 teams. So they're not great. So the Denver Nuggets are going to score. The problem with Denver, I think, lies where, can they contain Portland's offense? Portland has a very lethal offense. Damian Lillard, I mean, again, they might have slowed him down one game, but I already know for game 3 he's going to probably adjust, or Terry Stotts might do some adjustments and get Damian Lillard a little bit more freed up, or CJ's going to go off. Or again, you have a guy like Carmelo Anthony who could go off as well, and Norman Powell. So they definitely, the key for Denver is containing Portland's offense and making sure that you limit the damage a guy like Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum have. But on the flip side, flipping over for Portland, you want to make sure you outscore Denver. They're going to score on you. You know that there's nothing you can do about that. They're going to score on you as well. But you got to outscore them. You got to be able to hit your shots. You got to be able to recognize doubles, and you got to be able to pass out when needed and make the right plays offensively, because that's your only strength in this series. Again, I definitely feel like this wouldn't be close if obviously if Denver was healthy. But I have to agree. I think with the combination of Portland's lethal offense and Denver's experience and savvy, this could be a pretty competitive series, and I agree it should go 7 games.
Yeah, man. To your point about how Denver's pretty much gonna have to outscore the Blazers in the series, that was pretty much the difference between Game 1 and Game 2, right? In Game 1, Nikola Jokic was passing out his double teams, and nobody was hitting any shots. And as a result, Nikola Jokic had like 1 assist in the first half or something like that. But in the second game, Nikola Jokic was passing out those double teams, and his players were hitting those shots, and that was pretty much the difference between game one and game two.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, that was the Denver Portland series. Moving on to the final series of the Western Conference first round playoff matchup, we have the fourth seeded Los Angeles Clippers taking on the fifth seeded Dallas Mavericks. Now the Clippers come into this series with the third best offense in the league and the seventh best defense in the league. Meanwhile, the Mavs come in with the ninth best offense and the 19th best defense in the league. Now, in terms of this series, it's pretty cut and dry in terms of when you're looking at both teams. The Clippers clearly have the advantage in this series. They have star talent in Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Serge Ibaka. They have good role players in Patrick Beverley, Marcus Morris, Ivica Zubac, etc., etc. The only reason the Clippers could lose this series is if they flop again in the playoffs. The Clippers have more talent, more experience, better on both ends of the floor than Dallas. They should win this series. Like, there should not be any issues with the Clippers losing this series. But again, the Dallas Mavericks have the guy Luka Doncic, who has already proven he's a big-time playoff performer. Luka isn't afraid of the moment. And again, he can. And the Mavs have an offense that can get hot whenever. As we've seen in Game 1, the Mavs offense got hot. Clippers weren't able to adjust, and Mavs took Game 1. Not to mention, the Mavs have some decent role players. I mean, obviously, Tim Hardaway Jr. is already there, Dorian Finney-Smith, Matthew Kleber, Josh Richardson. So they have some players. But I think the biggest factor for the Dallas Mavericks is Rick Carlisle. He has a lot of playoff experience, championship experience, and he can adjust when needed. But again, there isn't a ton to say about this series. Overall, the Clippers are a better team in this matchup and should be able to edge up the Mavericks. But I do see the Mavs stealing maybe another game. So my prediction for the series is Clippers in 6.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that prediction. One guy you didn't mention either was Kristaps Porzingis. Yeah. I think he's the X factor for the Dallas Mavericks in terms of, we know what we're going to get from Luka Doncic. But Kristaps Porzingis is the X factor for this team and has always been the X factor for this team since they acquired him. Unfortunately, he's never been able to live up to the expectations they've placed on him, pretty much because of injuries, and that is one of the main reasons that New York traded him away. Side note, I would definitely agree with the fact that New York won that trade. So yeah, we took an L there, and hey, listen, most other people also took an L because everyone pretty much clowned the Knicks for that trade.
But nobody expected Kristaps to be basically a shell of what he was. Like, I get the big men recover from the ACL a little differently than guards do, but again, you can't. There's just moments where he just forgets he's 7'3". Like, he's just soft.
Well, that's the problem that's always existed with Kristaps Porzingis. He plays like a guard. The unfortunate thing is, bro, you're 7'3". You're not a guard, right? Bro, get in the low post and do some hook shots or something, man. Don't. Even when, that's been my problem with him too. Even when he was able to get into low post position, he would always do his regular turnaround fadeaway over the right shoulder. And it's like, buddy, if you're able to, do a hook shot, you're like 3 feet closer to the rim, right?
Yeah.
So Kristaps Porzingis, I think, would be the X factor for the Dallas Mavericks. One thing about the Clippers is it'll be interesting to see how they adjust to playoff basketball because of the fact that one story that's been well documented for the Clippers this season is their over-reliance on the three-point shot. And that was my similar point to the Utah Jazz, who are also, face a similar predicament. The Clippers this year under Tyronn Lue have really embraced the three-point shooting. Kawhi Leonard, PG, all of them have all been shooting more threes this season. And as a result, their offense has flourished because of the fact that they were hitting a good percentage of the threes, and they were taking among the most threes in the league. And so as a result, they had a great offensive ranking. However, in their big games, when the offense, and the games slow down, especially against teams like the Lakers, like the Bucks, etc., we saw how their over-reliance on the jumper could get them in trouble. And again, that's my point. It seems to be the case with every team in the league. If you keep relying on a three-point shot, chances are in the playoffs it'll screw you over because of the fact that the playoffs are a different game. There's more physicality. The games are slower. You're not getting as many opportunities. You're not getting any good looks. you have to be able to utilize things like the mid range and attack the rim. And you have at least one of the guys who can do that very well in Kawhi Leonard. But other players have to be able to do that as well. And then final point about the Clippers is I don't want it to sound like I'm a hater, but at the same time, Paul George does have a history in the playoffs. Marcus Morris has kind of been a hit or miss guy for his whole career. And then Serge Ibaka was great for the Toronto Raptors in his last season or in his last two seasons. However, he's also prone to mishaps in the playoffs, to say the least. So other guys have to be able to step up this year to surround Kawhi Leonard, and Tyronn Lue will have to be able to adjust. Now, Tyronn Lue has done a great job for the Clippers this year. However, me and Hani have both been very critical of Tyronn Lue in the past, and I still don't understand where this reputation of him being an amazing coach came from, because I've never personally seen it. I've never personally seen it. I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but I'm not saying he's some great coach that everyone makes.
He's not like a Phil Jackson or something
exactly.
like that. Like what's up, paint him out to be.
Yeah. So Tyronn Lue, I think, will have to be able to adjust, and going up against a very good coach as well in Rick Carlisle, it'll be an interesting chess match, I think, between the two teams. But to your point, I think it is, the Clippers' talent, I think, is inevitable. They have more options. They have, more, better players on both sides of the ball. And they have the best player in the series in Kawhi Leonard, I think, who is better than Luka Doncic, at least at this stage of their careers. And then they have a better secondary star in Paul George compared to Kristaps Porzingis. Yeah. So I think just because of the fact of those facts, I will agree with you in the sense that I think Dallas is good enough to steal a couple games, but I think the Clippers will win this in the end.
Well, they should. I mean, they have to. If the Clippers flame out again, now remember, Kawhi Leonard's a free agent this year, or maybe opts out, which he most likely will. But so, again, the Clippers need to get it done, And with the Lakers struggling, this might be their best chance to make it into the finals.
Yep.
So, or at least the conference finals, for crying out loud. They haven't even been to one as a franchise, which is so embarrassing.
Yo, that's funny, man.
So, yeah.
Bottom tier franchise.
Yeah. We're going with the Clippers in 6. Hopefully, way off P and the crew don't disappoint. But yeah, man, those were our predictions for the Western Conference first round matchup. Just to recap, for Utah and Memphis, we have Utah winning in 5. We have the Lakers winning in 7 against the Suns. We have the Nuggets winning in 7 against the Blazers. And we have the Clippers winning in 6 against the Mavs. Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree with our picks? Either on social media or the comment section on YouTube. And with that, moving on to the up and under segment to end off this episode. First off, are you up or under on the Charlotte Hornets picking up the team option on head coach James Borrego for next season?
I mean, I'm up on it. Like, I don't think he's an amazing coach, but considering what the amount of success they had this season, I think it's only justified and deserved for them to give that option to James Borrego and see what he can do. Another guy from the Greg Popovich tree, right? And so shout out James Borrego for having the season that he did. Unfortunately, the last game was terrible, but he at least deserves that extra year based on what he did this season.
I mean, the last game is kind of the most important game.
Yeah.
Thanks NBA for making it such that they would have made the playoffs if it was a regular format. But you know what? That is what it is. But I think for James Borrego, I think he did a pretty solid job. Obviously, I think what it comes down to now, what Charlotte does in the offseason, if they go for it to make a playoff push next year and they don't make it, then I think James Borrego is going to be gone after next season. But I think overall, just building a culture in Charlotte, developing players, he's done a pretty solid job for that organization.
Yeah. Next up, are you up or under on Andrew Wiggins recently announcing his commitment to Team Canada for the 2021 qualifiers and Olympics?
Yeah, I'm up on this, bro. We've been saying this for 2 years now at this point?
Bro, I mean, we've been saying it for a long time.
We've been saying it for a long time. But for Team Canada, we have so many good Canadian players in the NBA. And if they all come together, bro, with Nick Nurse coaching, it's going to be a hard team to beat, man. And Andrew Wiggins, with the season he had this year under Steve Kerr, imagine what he can do with Nick Nurse, And again, I know we lost out on a guy like Jamal Murray, but when you see what guys like Dylan Brooks are doing, obviously what Ken Burge was able to do this season, Kelly Olynyk, there's a lot of talent on this Canadian squad. And you add a guy like Andrew Wiggins, who could break out, and could even have a great chance to learn under Nick Nurse. This is a great opportunity for him. We've been always telling Andrew Wiggins, especially while you're in Minnesota, go and play for Team Canada. Get a new development system into you. Maybe you'll be able to learn something, improve your game on the NBA court. So it's great that he's finally doing it.
Yeah, man. Like, not to mention, we have all the OGs probably going to play too. Tristan Thompson, Kojo, all of those guys too. Kelly Olynyk, like you mentioned. We have a bunch of OGs who usually always suit up. RJ Barrett's another one that's going to be this year. Chris Boucher might be able to make the team as well. So we have a lot of players. Andrew Wiggins, I think, to be a number one option for this team, I think Andrew Wiggins is a great player to have. I think this year he's going to finally come because of the fact that, there's no more Triano pretty much. And again, like, we had a criticism of him not joining the team. I don't exactly blame him for him not wanting to play under Triano.
Okay, but listen, now Nick Nurse is here. Andrew Wiggins, he's committed to Team Canada. It's great for Team Canada.
Yep.
Hopefully we make it to the qualifiers. Moving on, are you up or under on the NBA? Saying that it treated LeBron's health violation, COVID-19 health violation, similarly to others after he wasn't suspended. So basically, the NBA is justifying the reason to not suspend LeBron by saying that, hey, there's similar instances with other players, and we handle it the same way, so that's why we're giving LeBron no suspension for this. So you're up or under on that?
I mean, I'm under, bro, because God, bro, they should have at least named one example, right? Yeah. Here's the thing. I don't blame them for not suspending LeBron or for not sending him out because of the fact that it's LeBron James. He runs the NBA, right? Like, from a business, no matter how much you hate LeBron, if you use your business sense, right? Exactly. Any businessman would do that. LeBron James runs the league. He's your main source of revenue.
The NBA would do it for any of their stars. Like, imagine Steph Curry was in a similar situation. You think the NBA would let Steph Curry? Kevin Durant, same thing, man.
Yeah, it's not just a LeBron thing. Exactly. It's not just a LeBron thing. It's protect your assets that make you huge amounts of money.
The NBA will come out and say that, hey, we did it because it's LeBron freaking James, but we all know it. We all know it's LeBron James.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me that the NBA would have suspended LeBron from a playoff game and lost out on playoff revenue.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
Next up, are you up or under on the Utah Jazz's Jordan Clarkson winning the Sixth Man of the Year award?
Yeah, I'm hella up, bro. One prediction down.
1 of 1.
We got one right. So hopefully our other ones are all right too. So you haven't check out our awards predictions episode as well, a couple of episodes ago. But yeah, man, we said it in the awards episode. We think Jordan Clarkson deserved it. Obviously, really establishing a role in Utah, being a big factor in why Utah was able to get the #1 seed in the NBA. This season, and just being the leader in bench scoring this season. Obviously, that's kind of how this award works. So that if you score the most points off the bench, you kind of win this award. But he was great for Utah this season, man. Really established himself in a role. It's still amazing to me. Like, I saw this earlier where the Lakers had Jordan Clarkson, D'Angelo Russell, Julius Randle, and Brandon Ingram, and couldn't develop any of them. And now,
throw in another guy like Ivica Zubac.
Yeah, 3 of these guys are all-stars, and one guy won Sixth Man of the Year. That's crazy.
That's why patience is key with the young players, right? But yeah, Jordan Clarkson, like I said, honestly, if it were up to me, I would probably give it to Joe Ingles, if I'm being honest, because of the fact that he's kind of, that Swiss Army knife for the team and kind of does everything for them. And if you look at the bench unit, even kind of plays a huge part in their success. But, like Hani said, the award usually goes to the bench gunner, right?
Yeah.
The player that gets the most points off the bench. Jamal Crawford, J.R. Smith, Lou Williams. So, no surprise that Jordan Clarkson wins this year's Sixth Man of the Year award.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, are you up or under on the Indiana Pacers still evaluating head coach Nate Bjorkgren? Now, obviously, we talked about it a few episodes ago where Nate Bjorkgren was kind of on the hot seat just based on the fact that there were reports on, people in the organization not liking the way he coached, even guys like TJ Warren not wanting to asking for a trade because Nate Bjorkgren was going to be coaching. So the Pacers are obviously still evaluating the situation, but are you up or under on the situation with Nate Bjorkgren?
I mean, I'm up on the sense that they're still evaluating him because you want to wait until everything settles down to have a clear head and make your decision properly. Not to mention the fact that Kevin Pritchard himself is also on the hot seat for this Nate Bjorkgren hiring, as he already was on the hot seat for time before that as well. But yeah, Nate Bjorkgren, I think they're considering everything that's come out. I don't understand how you can bring this guy back, right? I can't wrap my head around him coming back to that team and everyone in the locker room just being like, "Hey, welcome back to this team." Yeah, like I can't see it happening. So I don't think he's gonna be back. And if everything that's come out about his tenure in Indiana is true, then I don't think he should be back, in all honesty.
Well, I mean, it really depends on how much of it's actually true and how much of it's just blown out of proportion. Now, obviously, Nick Nurse being, obviously like being a long time, friend of Nate Bjorkgren, and obviously was a former assistant of Nate Bjorkgren, the former assistant of Nick Nurse. He obviously did completely squashed the report saying that this is completely false. But again, Nick Nurse doesn't really know at the end of the day. He's not inside the Pacers organization or the Pacers locker room, and neither do none of us. And none of us really know what's going on. So yeah, I mean, it feels like the Pacers are still evaluating, making a complete decision, really looking at all the facts here. But yeah, I mean, if all of this comes to be true, then yeah, I would definitely say it's very difficult to see Nate Bjorkgren back. But hey, Nate, there's a seat on the bench next to Nick Nurse.
Yeah, man, Chris Finch is gone, so extra seat opens up. And then finally, are you up or under on the NBA and Adam Silver wanting to revisit their midseason tournament idea? Now, this is primarily based off of if you guys watch football or soccer, it's European soccer or football have these midseason tournaments in their respective leagues. For example, English League, FA Cup, stuff like that. So Adam Silver pretty much wanted to take a page out of their book and introduce a mid-season tournament idea where, for example, the winning team would each get $1 million respectively. So are you up or under on the NBA wanting to revisit this whole idea?
I'm under on this, man. I agree with Jamal Murray. Why do you want to overcomplicate the season even more? The whole playing thing, I was already wasn't really that great in terms of overall what we really got out of it. We got maybe a game and a half really that was really good. Yeah. Because and again not every year we're gonna get all LeBron James and Steph Curry in the play-in. It's just not gonna happen. So the fact that the NBA wants to add it, I mean, it's really just a revenue making idea. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't do anything massive. Again, I would say if the NBA shortens the regular season a little bit more, make games mean more, then that's an idea I'd be more open to. But the mid-season tournament to me makes no sense.
It makes no sense for me because of the fact that you're already overburdening players, right? Yeah. There's already been discussions about shortening the season. Now you want to add on games. Again, the play-in is already there, so that creates even more, issues. But then, him basing it off of Europe. My issue with that is, first of all, it's already being established in tradition for their leagues, right? Having it come to the NBA, introducing it is going to be a very hard concept. Second of all, with the European soccer leagues, the reason why the midseason tournament works out so well is because of the fact that they decide their champions based on every single game of the season, and then whoever has the most points or wins at the end of the season wins the championship, right? And that's how they decide it. And then they also have the Champions League on top of that. So that way, they're able to have those mid-season tournaments, knockout style, because that's different from the regular championship style and the way they determine their championships. The NBA already has a tournament to determine their top champion, which is the NBA playoffs, right? And that's the biggest goal. Teams, if you introduce a mid-season tournament, will not care at all. They'll send out their G League squad for that mid-season tournament. $1 million per player is not going to make a difference.
Imagine someone gets hurt.
Exactly. Imagine somebody gets hurt. So teams will not, I don't think, care at all about that mid-season tournament. And like I said, it works out well for European soccer because of the fact that they have numerous other things going on already that makes it work. In the NBA, those conditions are not met for them. So a mid-season tournament idea, I don't think the NBA should do it. Now, again, we'll have to see how this idea actually comes to pass, but yeah, for me, I'm also under.
I mean, we also said that about the play-in too, and that ended up happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, YouTube, basically wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the upcoming podcast. Also, follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at uploader_podcast, Facebook.com/uploader_podcast for all the latest updates. Whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news, or even our reaction to the NBA playoff series as they occur. So definitely check that out. And also check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we post blog posts about every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen or watch the full episode, you can read about it on our website. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. And yeah, man, playoffs have started. Playoffs are here, man. Things are getting exciting. And as soon as going to be what we're going to do all NBA predictions coming up soon. And then a few off-season topics as well.
Yep.
So yeah, stay tuned for more content coming up. But yeah, we'll start that for this week's episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.